Hello and welcome. Another edition of the Core Vive College Coaches Corner. And each and every week, take a few minutes, catch up with college coaches. I want to remind you before we dive in, Core Vive nutritional products. We got a lot of people that ask me with regard to supplementation and things of that nature. Biggest thing about Corvive, NSF certified, which means that all of the ingredients are factually there. They're allowed by Major League Baseball as well as the NCAA. Get your link below. Save 30% on your protein, on your hydration products, and your creatine. Corvive Corp, really one of the best in the business when it comes to protein and creatine supplements. Today, we're going to talk something near and dear to my heart, something I grew up with in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. The Northeast 10 College Baseball Conference has been one of the most prestigious, historic college baseball conferences in the country, going back decades to the days of Porky Vieira at New Haven, Jason King at Franklin Pearson. Today, we're going to be talking with Assumption College, the Greyhounds head coach, Mike Rocco. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you for having me. Really looking forward to it.
You know, you grew up in the great state of Massachusetts. You're Middlesex County, Tewksbury, and you know the landscape here in New England. What you played at Bryant, but what led you to Assumption, and what has it been like now and going into what is it, your 12th year, your 11th year as the head coach at Assumption?
So this is going to be my 13th year here at Assumption. It's crazy to think that I've been at the school for this long. Um, you know, I wasn't 100% sure as I was kind of winding down my college playing career that coaching was what I wanted to do. I really wanted to get into radio and broadcasting. That's what I really wanted to do. And I was lucky enough that after I graduated, I actually worked. I had an internship at WEEI for a little while, and I worked there. And when I graduated from Bryant, it was just me and one other kid in my class. So I was really close with the guys in the grade below me. And, August, they're starting to get ready to move back in. They're talking about the season. And I kind of started to get the itch again to get involved with baseball somehow. And my coach that I ended up playing for my last 2 years at Bryant, Jamie Pinzino, put me in touch with JP Pine. He had just taken over at Daniel Webster College. It was a small D3 school in Nashua,
Nashua.
New Hampshire,
Yep.
known for aeronautics. And JP, was gracious enough to grant me an interview, and me and him hit it off right away. And I spent 2 years with JP up in Daniel Webster. And then from there, I fell in love with baseball, being around the guys and the coaching, the teaching. And I started to throw my name out there to see what was on the horizon. I was still young, I was only about 24. And Lesley University in Cambridge, which was used to be an all girls school,
Right.
was starting to become co ed. They were going to start the baseball program. So I threw my name in, more for experience to go through an interview process and things like that. And one thing led to another, and I ended up getting the job. And I was there for a total of 4 years. 3 years, we actually fielded a team. And, being a part of the ground level and then seeing how the program has grown. And I still follow Lesley today. I've known some coaches that have worked there. So I still look back and, check and see how they're doing. And from there, I was lucky enough to fall into a good position where the Assumption position opened up. And kind of like the same thing. I didn't know, how much of a shot I had, but I threw my name in. And again, I was lucky enough to get this position. And I've been really lucky ever since this job's opened up and I've been here.
Well, now when you're transitioning from a student athlete into the coaching world, there is a transition, you kind of have to begin to separate yourself a little bit from being one of the guys to being the guy. What has that been like? What makes Assumption special for a student athlete? I know what it looks like in, Worcester, up in the hills, but talk a little bit about what makes Assumption so special for a potential student athlete.
I mean, I think people fall in love with the campus right away when they step foot on it. Obviously in New England, even in Central Mass, there's a lot of really well-known colleges, a lot of beautiful colleges, but I'll put Assumption up against any of them. When you come on campus, there's a certain sense of security when you walk on campus because the one way in, one way out. It's a big circle. You know, the road takes you all the way around the campus. So as you drive in, you're seeing everything: the dorms, the dining hall, all the athletic facilities, things like that. And it's just a really pretty campus. And it's a smaller school. We're a little bit under 3,000 students. Almost all the students live on campus, though, so it's not a commuter school. There's things to do during the weekends, athletic events. Over 40% of the student body is student athletes. So in the fall, you go out to a football game and you're supporting the football team, but then you look over, you got the women's soccer and field hockey teams over here, men's like football, baseball, everyone's supporting everybody. So it's really cool to see that. And along with that, we offer over 40 majors. So it's a school where if you're undecided, it's really easy to kind of figure out what you want to do as time goes on. You don't have to go in dead set on one major. You're going to be able to try out some different things and then from there figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Want to let parents know. I mean, I've lived in that area for the vast majority of my life. You have schools like Clark University, you have Holy Cross, you have WPI. Uh, so you have a lot of schools, Worcester State, now Worcester State University. So Assumption is in a very vibrant college community, spectacularly beautiful campus. And I can tell you, they have dorms behind the baseball field. So you have students in the dorms opening their windows in the spring, watching games. Let's talk a little bit about the Northeast 10 because obviously we have historic programs, nationally ranked programs like Southern New Hampshire. Franklin Pierce was one of the perennial dominant teams of the 90s and the early 2000s. New Haven. Talk a little bit about the conference with regard to year in and year out. The caliber of play athletically at Assumption is elite.
Well, I think kind of going back to what you talked about originally, like playing at Bryant, and when I played, they were still Division II and in the Northeast 10, and that was one of the big draws about looking at the Assumption job was that it was a level I played at. I knew really well about how good the baseball was in this conference, and I had connections to coaches that were in the conference at the time as well, and I'll put the teams in this conference up against anybody. You see, again, like you mentioned, Southern New Hampshire, the run that they've been on. Franklin Pierce is still really good. Bentley had a really good year last year. They were on the fringe of making the regional tournament. And then on the other side, when you look at Southern Connecticut, Adelphi, like you could go up and down the conference, and every team at one point or another has had their time in the sun. And it speaks to the depth of the conference, and especially in the Northeast region. There's a lot of good teams that are in the Northeast region, not in our conference. But I think that when you look at the totality of our conference, the 10 teams that are currently in here now, we'll compete with anybody. That would even go to the PSAC conference. Obviously, a lot of teams in our conference will go down to the Carolinas that play some of the schools down in the Sunshine State. I mean, we've been able to win games as a conference at a high level through against some of the best competition in the country. Southern New Hampshire, the past couple of years, has always represented themselves really well on the national stage. Franklin Pierce, like it's a lot of well-known schools come from our conference, and you don't want to be that school that's lagging behind.
Right.
Everyone's competing every single time, and every weekend when we go against somebody, it's a dogfight. And because everyone knows how important these conference games. There's no easy weekends. There's no easy single games. There's competition every time we take the field.
You had mentioned that you were a student athlete at Bryant when they were Division II. I think it's important for parents to understand schools like Merrimack, Bryant, Stonehill that are now in NCAA Division I were former Division II, staples and competing in this conference. And I would love, and you Lowell, back in the day, as we talked about earlier. when you're out recruiting, and I always try to get parents to understand, you had mentioned the Sunshine State Conference. One could make an argument that the Sunshine State Conference is as good, if not better, in some cases than some of the Division One schools across the country. But that having been said, there's really not a lot of talent separation. It's more of a depth issue with regard to Division Two to Division One. What type of athletes are you attracted to, or that you are actively recruiting, that you feel fit the Assumption Greyhound model?
I mean, listen, I think every coach is going to say the same thing. We want the best athlete, the guy that throws the hardest, the guy that hits the ball the furthest, the fastest 60 time. Every coach is looking for that. I think one of the biggest things that we look for in the student athletes that we recruit is that blue collar kind of dirt dog mentality. You know, I'm not going to speak for other schools, whether it's in our conference or out of conference, but some of them might have some better either facilities or think training programs than what we have. And that's okay. I want the kid that doesn't care about the flash, but that's going to come in every single day and work as hard as possible to try to find a way to improve the team, whether that's pushing somebody else that's in front of them, whether that's you being the guy, you being a pinch runner, late inning reliever, whatever it is. I want the guy that's not afraid to get his hands dirty. And that's one of the biggest things that we look to see when guys are playing. Are they the flash guy, or are they the guy that's really like, hey, that's a guy that we want next to us and we know that's going to go to battle with us every time we step on the field? And that's kind of subjective sometimes, but that's the important thing about getting out and seeing kids as often as possible, getting as much video. Like, from when I played, there was no Twitter and Instagram. You had to get in front of the coaches and show them that. But there's so many more tools with recruiting services, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all these different ways that you can recruit. And the more things that you consent to get in front of a coach, you're only helping yourself. And that's going to obviously make me and my staff want to get out and see you more. And the more we're able to get out and see you, the more we're able to make a judgment on you.
One of the things I want to throw out here is it's kind of a mass thing, but dirt dog, I'm not the only one that used that. I often get kidded. People will say to me, why do you keep saying dirt dog? Well, it's a certain characteristic that we look for as coaches. So one of the things, Mike, that I want to ask you about is the Northeast 10 active with regard to fallbacks during the portal? Like this year, where December 1st, you're going to have some athletes that will be entering the portal due to get to the cap. What type of role does the portal play within the Assumption program?
For us, I think it's one of those things where we obviously keep an eye on. It would be foolish of us not to do our due diligence when we see a kid enter the portal. Now, with that being said, for our program, we're not building our roster through the portal. We still are very active recruiting high school kids and community college kids, things like that. So, when December 1st rolls around, will we be looking to find a way to maybe add a kid or two for January? Of course, just like I'm sure everybody else in our conference will. But at the same time, we're not the type of school that's going to be looking to bring in an entire new starting lineup or an entire new pitching rotation. I think for us, we're trying to build our culture with as much homegrown talent as possible and then supplementing it when we can. And I think that one of the biggest things for a kid that goes into the portal is understanding the type of school that you're going to, what you want to major in, the credits that are going to transfer in, GPA requirements. Like obviously there's student athletes that reach out to us and they're doing the mass blast of emails trying to get coaches' attention, which is fine. But, then we'll look at their transcript or what they want to major in. I think it's always important that if you have an understanding of the school academically and what you're looking for, then you're going to help yourself as a student athlete, find a home and find a place where you don't have to leave at the end of May again because you're not happy. And I think that's one of the biggest things that, talking about the type of student athlete we're looking at, we talked about the athlete part, but making sure that the student is a good fit as well too, that they can handle the academic workload, they have the proper GPA, the proper major minor that they want to get into, and they're able to make that type of adjustment to the academic workload and still be a pretty good athlete at the same time.
I want to let parents know anything that you are interested in with regard to Assumption College or the Northeast 10. You can find that in the Blue Book, the baseball Blue Book app has been totally redone, and I really encourage you take a few minutes, download the app in the Google and Apple store, and make and create your profile, because it really allows coaches to see your progress, monitor your videos, your contact information, as well as you as a family finding all aspects academically, athletically about Assumption College. Mike, one of the things that I get asked quite a bit from parents is, what types of questions should athletes be asking when they're sitting in front of you? How can you tell that this athlete is prepared? What type of questions are they asking you specifically about Assumption College that can help future student athletes prepare accordingly?
I love the family that comes in with, either handwritten notes or something on their phone. I think that that shows that, that they're genuinely interested in the school. And another thing is letting your son speak. Obviously, mom and dad, listen, I'm a parent now. I have a 6 year old and a 4 year old, and I'm a few years away from the college side of things, but this is still this is the biggest decision that your child is going to make. Mom and dad are going to have to sign off on it. I get that, but at the end of the day, your son is going to be have to be the one that's going to feel most comfortable, because he's away from his family for the first time. He's going to be around this coach and these players. So hearing them speak, I think, is really important as well. I still want the parents involved. I still want them to ask questions, but letting the majority of their son do the work, I think, is really important. And then asking the questions: what's a typical day like? How does my class schedule work in compared to practice and game schedules? What do we do in the spring for when we travel and we're missing classes? Those are the big ones. Obviously, I know that they are going to ask about where do you see me fitting in, what the depth chart kind of looks like. All those are fine, but the ones that really hit home with me are when they're trying to map out what their time is going to look like. How are you going to help me, not just for the 4 years that I'm a student athlete at Assumption, but for the 60, 70 years after I graduate from Assumption? How are you going to, help me get into the workforce, make me a better person, things like that? Those are the questions that I really like to hear.
Mike, you bring up an interesting point, and I'm going to, just for parents to understand, I knew Mike when he was an athlete. I knew Coach Pinzino very, very well. We've known each other for 30 plus years. And I remember Mike as an athlete. So, Mike, one of the things I want to ask you, and it's not just a New England characteristic, but can you talk about that we talk about the jump from high school to college, and I don't think enough parents really understand. It's a big boy world in college, meaning you're competing every day. And they hear us say that. But talk about, in the world of college athletics, that mental toughness, that mental grind through February and March. It's cold outside, it's windy, it's blustery. It's a different type of mindset playing in the Middlesex Valley conference, or out of high school, or Central Mass conference when I was a kid, and then you go into college, and you got college travel requirements. It takes a certain type of kid that really understands, man, this is tough, this is challenging, but I'm going to grind my way through it, which is where we come up with Dirt Dog. But talk a little bit about that mindset as a college player. Man, you got to fight every day, not only for against competition, but within your own team.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that's one of the benefits of all the kids in the Northeast. They've dealt with this their entire life. Not for I would have loved to have grown up in Florida, be outside,
Right.
work on my tan all year long, all
Right.
that, but that's not where we're from. And you have to do things a little bit differently in this area if you want to get noticed in the competition, because if you're not finding an indoor cage or a place to work out or things like that, somebody else is. And everyone that plays in college, Division One, two, three, community college, JUCO, whatever, was most likely a really good player on their high school or prep team, whatever it is. Now you're in a setting where everybody was one of the best players on their team. So everyone wants instantaneous results. They want that instant gratification. But I tell this to recruits all the time. Sometimes you're just not ready. And it doesn't mean that you didn't work hard. Sometimes your body's just not in the right spot. Sometimes you come from a smaller school. You haven't seen some of the velocity or some of the strength that some of these college athletes have. And especially now with, you look at the COVID years where guys are getting fifth and sixth years, we would have a 17-year-old kid stepping on campus going against a 23-year-old. And that's a massive, massive difference. And it gets back to that whole mentality of putting your head down and working as hard as you possibly can every single day. And even if you're not finding a way to get in, if you're not going to be in the starting lineup, you're pushing somebody. There's a guy in front of you that's going to notice how hard you're working, and that's going to make them work a little bit harder too, because they don't want to get pushed out by that 17 or 18-year-old kid, and everyone everyone's body moves at a different pace. They mature at a different spot. Like I tell guys all the time, I went into college at 180 pounds and I graduated at 240. That didn't happen overnight. Like my body changed drastically, and we see it all the time here with guys. They come in like as skinny as a rail as a freshman, and then now they really see what it's like to be in a real weightlifting and conditioning program, what it's like to take care of your body. And on the flip side, how much weight they lose during the season.
Right.
All the travel that we have to do, with all the rainouts, snowouts, moving games around. You could be playing 6 or 7 games in a week. That takes a toll on your body physically and mentally. But trying to find those ways to do the little bit of extra to push yourself. And I think the other thing that helps out a lot too is that up in the Northeast, there's so many multi-sport athletes. When
Bingo.
when they go into college, their freshman year is the first time that they really get an opportunity to focus on one sport. They're not jumping from football to basketball, then to baseball season. It's fall baseball and they're weightlifting. They're in their, individual phase. They're still weightlifting. They're eating. They're doing, they're getting their extra hitting in. And then the season comes. I don't think people realize the type of growth, if they really focus, that they can make those first couple months in college and start to set themselves up for a great season or a great career.
Final question, Mike, and I want you to really share with parents. I get that question all the time. Professional baseball. My son aspires to play professional baseball. Well, first of all, there's a lot of phenomenal alums from not only Assumption, but from the Northeast 10. I mean, year after year, athletes are getting drafted out of that conference. Wooden Back Conference, really a separator. Talk a little bit about not only some of your alumni, but the draft. You do send guys out to the Cape, New England Collegiate League. There is scouts at the games. Talk a little bit about that dynamic so parents know and understand. Hey, a lot of big time eyeballs come and watch, Assumption and other Northeast 10 programs.
I mean, I can tell you throughout the entire course of my career coaching at Assumption, there's always people at games, always, whether we're down south, spring break, scouts, the regional scouts reaching out. We had a player drafted in 2022. Jack Chody went in the 9th round to the San Francisco Giants. And Jack's a great example. He's a local kid, kind of flew under the radar a little bit because he didn't play in the big club programs. He had the frame. He's a left-handed pitcher, and he got to college. He worked extremely hard. He's very determined, and he went from a walk-on that nobody really heard of to a 9th-round draft pick, and he was up in Double-A with the Giants this past year. Ray Fagnet was somebody who, obviously, I never coached, but I've gotten to have a relationship with because of his ties to Assumption, working with the Boston Red Sox. the years that Southern New Hampshire, Franklin Pierce, New Haven, just pumping out student athletes that are getting drafted. I mean, there was back-to-back years when was a player at Bryant, when Franklin Pierce had 7 and then 8 guys drafted in back-to-back years. My first real taste of it, though, was Josiah Gray, who
Yep.
plays with the Nationals.
Nationals. Yep.
We had a player at the time, Andrew Janig, who was a catcher from BC High, Quincy, Mass, and it was him and Josiah Gray, and they were both their draft eligible year. And Josiah came out, he threw at Assumption. It was a miserable day. It was early April. We had frozen rain the night before. We're trying to get the game ready. And, he's 95, 96, hard slider, wood bats. Like, it was unbelievable. And our entire, you mentioned how the backdrop of Assumption works with the dorms. The entire back was filled with scouts. It was unbelievable. And, when Jack played, and, there's other guys, I know I'm forgetting some of the people that Pierce and Southern New Hampshire has had. Like, when we've made the conference tournament, that entire front couple rows is all scouts. And it's kind of cliche to say, but if you're good, they'll find you. And again, especially kind of going back what I mentioned with the recruiting side of things, there's so much technology and the Twitter videos and things like that. You post a video of you throwing in a game and you have a high velo, or you have a great batting practice, or you hit all these measurables, scouts are going to start to reach out. And it's not just this thing where you have to go down south. You have to play Division One. I mean, as well as good as anybody, there's players that are getting drafted from some of the Division III schools in New England. So there's really good baseball in the Northeast. And just to be in the conversation with a lot of these other schools, because of a guy like Jack or Steve Santucci or,
Yep.
Ray Fagnan, guys like that have connections to Assumption, that have played professional baseball, it means a lot, because, again, you look at how many guys Southern New Hampshire, New Haven, Lowell, Bryant, the Northeast 10 schools have pumped out. It's pretty impressive. And again, you're seeing the Division III kids jump up for their grad year to play at some of the Division I schools that get picked up. Division II kids are doing that. There's eyes out on everyone every time you play, and you have to have that mentality that every time I step on the field could be my day that somebody notices me.
Well, I want to put a shout out to Steve Santucci, probably one of the finest families that I've ever gotten to know my entire life. Former Assumption Greyhound, elite athlete, could fly. And I always kid with him now, because he always thought that his son Jonathan would always be a hitter and never a pitcher only. And now he's going to be a star at the big league level with the Mets. So Tooch joined the club of the Parent of Pitcher Club. But, Mike, I want to say thank you so very, very much. I really encourage parents. I lived in that area. I can just tell you this: Assumption College is the hidden gem in the entire New England landscape, both academically as well as athletically. And if you have a passion, or your athlete has a passion for academics and athletics, you're going to struggle to find a better program than Assumption College. It's just a beautiful, beautiful campus, and well worth the time to visit. Everything about Coach Rocco, Assumption Baseball, can be found in the Blue Book, but I'll have it in the description, both in the podcast as well as the YouTube videos. And Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome. Really appreciate it.
All proteins are not the same. I encourage you to choose a grass-fed whey protein. The cattle have a cleaner diet, grazing on natural grass, which is going to mean that it's going to have higher branched chain amino acids, also your omegas and your CLAs. I'm telling you, it matters from a recovery standpoint. Choose the best protein and you're going to see the best gains and the best recovery. I'm telling you, athletes, make a wise choice, because it matters what you put in your body.